Good afternoon, President, Convention. Back with you again. So yes, indeed, you're quite right, President. I think this survey, it's the first time it's been publicly, should we say, communicated, but it certainly has served its purpose in terms of informing our President and our General Secretary both in their discussions with the stakeholders in the Department of Education, and indeed through the series of engagements with the Oireachtas Committee on COVID-19. So maybe then I'll take you, I'm quite conscious of time at the end of a long day for a lot of you. We'll take you through the results, and we will make the results available on our laptop. So pre-COVID-19, 70% of our teachers were using ICT on a daily basis in our classroom. A further 21% were using it a few times a week. This really, I think, puts to bed the kind of narrative that is sometimes peddled about teachers, particularly second-level teachers, that they're Luddites, they don't want to embrace technology, and that they are not willing to engage with the digital age. So, and indeed, it's worth noting that these findings are corroborated by other research that is going on around teachers' use of digital technologies, most notably the pre-pandemic inspectorate evaluation report, which found that 60% of teachers were using ICT on a daily basis in their classroom. And of course, the ESRI and the TCD report post-COVID indicate a similar percentages. So teachers are engaging with the digital technology. Only in answer to indeed what Ian Colgan asked us earlier on this morning, only 61% of our teachers were provided with a laptop by the school. And I should say, President, that we had a total of 3,526 teachers taking part in this survey. That's almost 22% of our membership. So it's a highly representative and broad survey. So only 61 have been provided with a laptop by the school. And I think that's absolutely where some of the money must go when we get this plan next week. Teachers need the digital technology, students need the digital devices, and that's absolutely important. So after March the 12th, we asked teachers what did their schools, in other words, their managements do, etc. So 68% reported that they had received guidance on continuity of learning from their school management. This guidance took the form of advice on how to use the school platforms, links to training for the school platforms, links to training for other platforms, contact from the digital learning team, and I'll come back to that later on. That's a really critical dimension in how well or how less well schools were able to meet students' learning needs. School tutorials, and what was very interesting, a number but not sufficient numbers of teachers said that they had a virtual timetable which did not seek to mechanically replicate the physical timetable, which gave time for teachers to prepare the digital content, upload it, and then teach it. That, I'm afraid, was a minority experience, and it's something I think we have to be absolutely adamant about going forward. Technical support and team meetings. However, teachers reported that overload in terms of communication from school management, from the school, was pervasive. They were receiving daily, weekly, if not daily emails, frequently outside of school time. Contrary to what would have been normal practice, there was almost weekly staff meetings or different team meetings. What was of particular concern to teachers, and indeed we got quite a lot of queries on, and it's something we have to look at very technically, President, into the future, is the lack of guidance from schools around online security, GDPR concerns, child protection concerns. You are literally looking at children in their very intimate spaces of perhaps even their bedroom. And of course, lack of clarity around schools' acceptable use policies. So I think there is a need as well for the guidance next week to have very clear guidance on what these are regulatory areas. One of the very invidious findings from our research was that school teachers, in complete, shall we say, contrast to the normal respect for their autonomy, were being asked to give weekly reports to the principal and school management on the extent of their engagement with pupils. That, I think, is a very worrying development, President, and it's something we should not be allowed to happen. This notion that teachers' autonomy is undermined by weekly reporting on their teaching is really not acceptable. And of course, there was teachers felt that there was pervasive. We can move to the next slide, Bernadine, please. Teachers felt there was pervasive pressure from school management to contact the students. So I've given you some flavour of the quotations here, and I know we're a little bit short on time and we'll skip through them, but they really are, I think, very, very indicative of the types of pressures that teachers were experiencing. So remote teaching, I will get to the meat of it, welfare, workload, home life in a moment. I just want to give you the statistics. So 98% of those teachers we responded were engaged in online teaching. The minuscule 2% who were not engaged had very clear reasons. They didn't have the device. They were in, and one person says they were in the car park of a hotel up in North Donegal trying to teach their class. They had no broadband. And in some instances, unfortunately, there was personal circumstances of illness that prevented teachers from teaching. And then again, I won't reiterate because we're pressed for time, but you can see what teachers were actually doing, and what was obviously most widely used was the existing platforms and apps and school email. So we'll move to the next one. So we asked teachers about their experience of remote teaching. 86% reported a significant increase in their workload. 70% reported regular staff meetings, and perhaps I should clarify, these weren't just staff meetings in the sense of whole school staff, but departmental teams, the student support team, the special education team. Some teachers had multiple team meetings during the week. Again, massive workload on top of trying to teach their classes. Only 2% said that remote teaching had no impact on their work-life balance. Coming then to a topic that's obviously very, very dear to your own heart, President, and indeed very, I think, increasingly pertinent to all of the public debates on the impact of COVID and remote working in people's lives. 29% of teachers said that there was an overwhelming impact of remote teaching on their work-life balance, followed by 41% who reported a major impact. Again, minuscule numbers of 2% said it had little or no impact on their work life. So we asked teachers what they were doing we gave them a set of questions to indicate what they were doing to look after themselves. And I think you can see it there. Obviously, looking after your physical health, slightly worrying, less proportion looking after mental health. Very, very strong resort to collegiality and teamwork and talking to your fellow professionals, communication with colleagues, and 2% volunteering in communities. This was an open question, so we got a very wide range of feedback. Some of the feedback was quite interesting, showing the resilience of teachers. Some teachers had taken up martial arts. One teacher, one person says they had climbed Carrauntoohil, another person had started an ostrich farm, and I thought the most engaging of all was, and I says, youth is on your side, they had moved in with their girlfriend. So there's some, every cloud has a potential silver lining perhaps. So we looked then at the qualitative data, and what was interesting about our survey, I think we had about, 12 yes/no questions with space at the end to give your feedback. What was really extraordinary about this research was, as I said at the outset, we had 3,526 respondents. We almost had 3,526 additional comments for every open question. So we have an absolute treasure trove of data on what was happening to teachers' lives during this experience. So I think I have tried to reflect that wide trove of data under the following headings. They had a multi-dimensional experience, the technological, the pedagogical, very, very deep experiences around their sense of self-efficacy, identity. They had a very, very negative social dimension to their experiences, and there was also a very, very pronounced and explicit emotional dimension. I'll be brief in giving some examples of each of those. The technological are obvious. We're talking about lack of compatibility of devices between students and teachers, poor broadband, teachers' own devices not being up to scratch, having to share devices at home with spouses, partners, adult children at college, children doing exams, primary school children. But one of the biggest, shall we say, headaches for teachers in terms of technology was the fact that they had to create digital content, something most of you have never done. And the time it took to get that right, to get it right as a creation, to upload it, was absolutely mind-numbing for so many people. And this, we really need to make sure that education portals such as SKELnet are rapidly expanded so that we have sufficient content and lesson plans for teachers to be able to draw down and get on with the teaching and doing what they do best, which is mediating the knowledge and cultivating skills rather than actually creating the plan themselves. So that was a real headache. And I'll just give a very small example. Most teachers says that devices students were using were mobile devices, and it was impossible to engage in correcting without uploading their material, sorting it out on their own screen, and literally communicating to individual students the feedback on their work. As one teacher said, I used to have a class of 31. Now I am a private tutor to 31 pupils, giving individual feedback. That, I think, encapsulates the technological problems. The pedagogical problems are related as well in terms of creating the content, but more about how do you actually, even in a Zoom live classroom, how do you mediate the content when you don't have that face-to-face engagement and you're not seeing the faces of the children and you're not seeing the mood in the room and catching the mood in the room and being able to respond to it. So this sensation of being literally distant or remote from your pupils had a very profound and pronounced impact on teachers' sense of self-efficacy. And you'll see it in some of the slides. Bernadine, if we want to move to some of the slides now under this heading, experience of remote teaching, some of the slides are very, very clear about teachers saying that they felt they could never, that they were continually worried, they were never getting through to their pupils, that they couldn't reach them. And this became particularly pronounced, as teachers said, so many students were disengaging from learning. As the time wore on, particularly the students who were in the exam years, they felt that they were being left behind and that there was that their motivation was diminishing significantly. So this notion of teachers, you know, the teacher is in control in their classroom. They know exactly what they're doing. They have planned, they have prepared, they are all the time making the professional judgments. But very, very difficult to do that when you're online, and sometimes you're not even online, you're emailing, etc. And this impacted on that sense of self-efficacy. Looking then at social, I think it's very important to say, and Miriam in her contribution to the General Secretary there referenced it, 70% of ASTI members are female. We have the unequivocal evidence that females in Ireland do most of the care work. And this is absolutely evident in the responses from our members. They were stressed out, not all of them, but many of them were stressed out by home duties, homeschooling, caring. I love the expression some of them used, I use it myself, running a household, making sure there's a meal on the table at the end of the day, engaging with lockdown, you can't go further than 2 meters or 5 meters. And this sense of what I would call sometimes for some teachers, it was actually a perfect storm of stress descended on their lives and really pronounced in terms of social and childcare. And again, Miriam, you're absolutely right. That's a critical issue for all workers, but particularly for teachers going back to work. And then finally, the emotional. When you have all of those type of pressures, it does take its toll on your emotional life and your sense of emotional well-being. And a lot of the commentary in the open questions was really very moving, I have to say. It really, and I think people were so honest, it was extraordinary. And to me, this is not a cry for help. This was a cry for, we need to deal with some of these issues. We need to deal with workload. We need to deal with welfare, etc. So Bernadine, I'm skipping through here, and I know it's a bit difficult for you. We'll move to, you have it up there, exponential increase. Okay, so there was, of course, an exponential increase in workload. Part of it was technology. I've already said to that, creating content, which didn't have to happen because it didn't happen in many other countries that we would like to see that we're on a par, if not superior to. Lack of ICT skills, not just among teachers. As I said, teachers are already using technology in the classroom, but teachers literally were, some of them were astonished in the commentary they had on. Students didn't even know how to open up a Word document. They didn't know how to download a file, maybe what do you call it, an Excel file for their business studies, fill it in, do their homework and send it back. So I think there's a real message here about digital literacy for students and if we do have more blended learning, which is inevitable into the future, that really has to be addressed. Part of the exponential increase in workload was this notion of always on. Teachers said, I am answering student emails and phone calls at all hours of the day and night. I know I shouldn't do it, but I'm doing it because I want to keep in touch. Because if I don't keep in touch with them, they're going to go really off the radar. So this culture, which we know from other sectors, has always been on. But in very many ways, this is motivated by teachers' ethic of care for their students and keeping in touch. And one teacher was very poignant comment one teacher made to the effect that she missed her students so much that she actually used to go out to her garden at about 3 p.m. each afternoon because she knew they were going down to the shopping centre at that stage, and it was so nice to see them and engage with them. One of the other big drivers of huge workload for teachers was having to contact students at home to check in with them. Have you done the homework? Did you get the email? And of course, we know teachers were playing a profoundly important pastoral role as well in terms of making sure that students and their families were okay, that they had food, that they were able to access the services which they may not have had the capacity or knowledge about to access. So there was a huge, and I think some of the articles we did for ASTI last month, I think have given a very strong flavour of that, shall we say, quiet, but nonetheless very sustained support for families. And then again, I have mentioned earlier on, one of the other exponential increases in workload was this new, novel and completely unacceptable practice of having to make weekly written reports to school management about the work you've been doing with your students. That's utterly unacceptable. So then we move to the massive decline in teacher welfare. We put these up, Bernardine, on the website, so we can skip just we'll skip the quotations in terms of time. Thank you. So massive decline in teacher welfare. Obviously, I'm repetitive a little bit at this stage, but workloads, no boundary between home and work, and we're all familiar with that at this stage. Diminished work-life balance, not just is there no boundary between home and work, where you come home, you park the car, you get in, you get organised, etc. But this notion that actually it's never ending. You're answering emails at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you don't have any sense of either physical space or social space. Again, teachers worried about students, their own home situation in terms of children, care, etc. Homeschooling their own children. And of course, teachers naturally and legitimately are ambitious for their own children. And they felt, some teachers were saying, I'm seeing my own children doing massive screen time on rubbish on TV, and I actually can't teach them or help them myself with their own learning because I'm so busy with my own teaching. And then what I think is an extremely damaging trend, and I think we have communicated this at the Oireachtas committee, was many teachers referred to how demoralizing it was that here they are working almost 24/7, and yet the negative media narratives around teachers at home, teachers not doing enough communicating, teachers not engaging with digital technology. And it was really, we've come across this before, delegates, in other ASTI research, that sense of the media not appreciating the work or the worth of teachers in our society. So we're nearly there. We just have 2 more slides to go. We asked teachers what were their priorities for the return to school, and we gave them choices, and they're all there for you delegates to see. Obviously, what's absolute top priority for you, for teachers, for your colleagues, for your principals, your deputy principals, is health and safety is a priority in return to school. Address teacher workload, promote teacher welfare. And of course, it hasn't gone away, and it shouldn't go away. Pay restoration for teachers. Now, we didn't, I'm afraid, yes, we did ask them there, equal pay for equal work. Again, that hasn't gone away. And these are really key trade union demands that we mustn't let up in the, shall we say, united effort you will make to get back to school safely. the corrosive impact of unequal pay structures is so evident in so much of the research we've done over the last number of years. So we asked teachers, I picked out a number of, this is my final slide, President, I know we're stuck for time. A lot of the commentary was very rich in terms of teachers doing self-reflection on how has this pandemic and remote teaching impacted on me. And certainly, there was 2 or 3 strands that came through in that. One of them was this idea of being more empathetic about their students, understanding where they were at. I suppose when you go onto a camera or you look into someone's home, you really get a very different idea of their home life and what makes them and all of that. But teachers, it wasn't just that they saw children's homes. They saw children, some of them valiantly trying to get work done, when in fact they were caring for younger siblings because mum and dad were working in retail or whatever, or out driving the buses. So a lot of teachers made very moving and supportive comments about it. They understand their students better. They see where they're coming from. And that's reflected in that quotation there about making me empathetic. Teachers, many of them, teachers are naturally learners. This whole idea of learning all the time, learning new skills, but of course it doesn't come close to face-to-face teaching. I think there's an interesting comment at the end of that page, and we turn then, Bernadine. They're highly unusual circumstances. I don't expect people to get everything done, but I feel our school is reactive to parental issues even more so than before. Now, I think that's quite a cautionary comment because one of the priorities that was identified in a recent survey by the Irish Students, Second Level Students Union and the National Parents Council post-primary was the lack of adequate communication between the school and the teacher. And again, I think, President, into the future, as we develop our protocols and back to work, this whole area about communication, who does it, when do they do it, and how often have they to do it? Protocols need to be very, very clear around that. So some other quotations there. So I think a lot of very stressful, but also rewarding in terms of learning new skills. A steep learning curve, and as one teacher said, my heart went out to him or her. I'm no longer afraid of technology, and I think we could say that perhaps for all of us. Finally, the very last slide, Bernadine. Yes, I think it's important that we say, Goramahagat Avunshori, Trí Vila Cuicéad Fiche Sé. It was absolutely extraordinary, your response to this in the midst of all your work. Actually, incidentally, 60% of the teachers, we had it on our survey monkey, 60% of you filled that in after 10 o'clock at night, which shows us exactly what your work-life balance was like, etc. So Goramahagat Avunshori, agus Goramahagat Uchtron and Chansa on a tourist Tovatak Shaw Haspon Shagas a Leo don Kogoil.